to take a question from somebody who has a question out there. Don't be shy if you have one. If you have a question you want to know, we are open to the question about trauma. Anything about it. Right here? Right here, Bruno. 1 second here. He's going to bring you a microphone. Right behind you.
How do you know that you're struggling with trauma?
I'm sorry.
How do you know that you're struggling with trauma?
How do you know if you are struggling with trauma?
But you're struggling.
It's a really good question. All right. So here's where I got to share some information. All right. I'm going to do a small diagram of the brain. Now, the brain is very, very complex. I'm not going to get into all the subcompartments. I am just going to give you the 4 basic components of the brain. Okay? So we have the brain stem at the very base of the brain. And then we have what's called the dicephalon. Connie's going to check me on my spelling here. All right, brainstem, dicephalon, then we have the limbic, and then the cortex. All right? Now, the brain starts developing at the point of conception. That's not new information. Scientists and biologists, physicians have known that for a very, very long time. At the point of conception, the brain starts developing. More specifically, the dicephalon and the brainstem are developing at a rapid rate during the 9 months of the child in mama's womb. By the time the child is born, 90% of the dicephalon and the brainstem have been developed. It will reach its full maturity by age 1. The limbic system reaches 90% of its maturity by age 5. The cortex, the uppermost part of the brain, reaches its maturity somewhere in the mid-20s, somewhere around 25 to 27. Girls, women develop at a faster rate than boys. So if you ever felt like you were talking to your teenager and you felt like it was going in one ear and out the other, that's because it was. Sorry, teenagers, you're catching up. All right? What does the brainstem do for us? The brainstem controls our body heat, our blood pressure, our heart rate, but it also controls something else called the ANS, the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system can either be sympathetic or parasympathetic. And this is a zone or a temperature, if you will, for the autonomic nervous system. If it's triggered, the ANS is sympathetic. And in the sympathetic, what is happening? You're back in the forest, you're walking through, and you've encountered the bear. The cortisol is pumping out, and from the cortisol, your adrenaline is kicking in, and now your body is in survival mode. And in that moment, it doesn't matter what development you have in the cortex or what development you have in the limbic system, all of the energies up here has gone offline. It has to go offline because we need maximum energy down in the low part of the brain, and the low part of the brain is the emotional. This is the logic, this is the emotional part. We don't need to be thinking about the danger, we don't need to be analyzing the danger, we need to be reacting to the danger. We're in survival mode. We need all of the energies here in order to accurately communicate to the body so the body will move.
Is that fight or flight? It's fight or flight, but actually fight or flight is an oversimplification. There's actually 5 levels of the neurosequential model. I can be calm. I can be on alert. I can be flight, fight, or excuse me, I skipped one. There's alert, or there's calm, alert, freeze, fight, flight. Those are the 5. So that's what's going to happen here. The limbic, right in the middle of your brain, is the hypothalamus. It's
It's like the dispatcher for all of your brain signals. And it sends signals to the high road and the low road. This is the high road, this is the low road. The high road moves really, really slow. And it gets its signals really carefully because it wants to analyze every single element and make sure it's right. Low road moves lightning speed. Boom! And you go, why is my kid acting without thinking? This is offline. What? They're doing the only thing they can do, and that's act without thinking. By the way, nothing's broken. This is the way it's supposed to happen. How do I know if I have trauma? A couple of signals. When I'm triggered, things happen in my body that tells me, or those who are observing me and who know me, can inform me whether or not my brain feels safe or if it's scared. Okay? So, take your hands like this, turn them like this, put them right here at your diaphragm. Okay? When you're triggered, and it doesn't matter if you're triggered because you're walking through the forest and you saw one bear, or if you're triggered because you spent a childhood, a lifetime as a childhood, with the bear coming home every night. Okay? It doesn't matter. When you're triggered, everything from the diaphragm up becomes incited. Everything from the diaphragm down is suppressed. You can put your hands down if you want. So that what happens when from the diaphragm up, everything is incited? In that moment, my heart rate shoots up, my blood pressure goes up, my blood vessels are constricted because that's what's driving the heart rate and the blood pressure up. My insulin flow is suppressed. All right? And the extremities of my fingertips and my toes may go numb, they may be cold, they may be clammy. I'm going to experience muscle tension. And if this is in a prolonged state, I may experience headaches and other discomforts that comes from the upper portion of my body being incited over a period of time. Meanwhile, what is below the diaphragm? My urinary tract, my bowels, they're suppressed. That means I have limited to no control over them. Why do some people mess on themselves when they're scared? Because they have no control. It has been observed in infants that have been living in a terror home that their body from the diaphragm down is so suppressed that as early as 18 months of age, their hip joints will be out of socket. How do I know if I'm experiencing trauma? My body keeps the score. I just borrowed that phrase from Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and that's the title of a book he wrote. If you're in for big, thick academic works, this is a book you need to read. It's daunting, but I highly recommend it. I know some of you in the room have read that book and can testify to it. Bessel van der Kolk from the Boston Institute of Trauma wrote this book, and it's entitled The Body Keeps the Score. Now, van der Kolk will tell you that he's not a believer, that he's an atheist. But he will also tell you early in his life he went to seminary to be a priest. Something shifted for him. What he doesn't know, and he's not telling you because he probably doesn't understand it, and this is where my vantage point kind of helps inform. Much of what he represents in his book is Torah consistent. It's an amazing thing. Again, I can only respond to your question this morning in general. It would take someone spending a bit more time, but if you find that you're often triggered, if you find that in certain contexts or certain sounds, certain aromas, certain things trigger you, and in that moment, you feel scared. In that moment, Intellectually, you know that you're okay, but emotionally, you feel like you need to do something to survive because you're in danger. If in that moment that you're triggered, you feel overwhelmed emotionally, if you're overwhelmed in ways to function, that you can't do what it is you want to do, what you know you can do, but you seem paralyzed, you seem overwhelmed, you're probably experiencing some degree of trauma. Again, trauma is not what has happened to you, it is your brain and body reacting to what has happened to you. So in that moment, you may have had, for the adults here, this is for adults right now, I'm often speaking to parents, helping them to understand their children who have had traumatic situations. But as an adult, if you've had a traumatic childhood, if you have things that happened to you in your childhood that were adverse, what we call adverse childhood experiences, that was then. This is now. And there may be moments in your life that you feel like, I have that understanding of time. That was then, this is now. I was not safe then, but I'm safe now. I felt certain ways then, and that was okay because that was then, but this is now. If that's your position, then you have found a degree of recovery. You are experiencing resiliency. But for some people, they get triggered, and it's what I call slinky time. Time doesn't move on a nice linear line. It moves more like a slinky. And it's like, oh boy, I thought I was over that, and here it comes again. And in a given moment, when you're triggered, you lose your sense of spatial distance. And even though that was back then, it doesn't feel like that. And it feels slammed up against you right now. This is starting to go offline, and you're losing your sense of awareness that it was then, because this down here is so much louder. Not only is this the high road that moves slow, and this is the low road that moves fast, this not only moves slow, it moves quiet. It doesn't have a very loud voice. And if you're going to listen to your ability to analyze and your ability to think through things, you got to pay close attention because it's almost like a whisper. But your emotional brain is loud and it's fast and it's overwhelming and whoa! So in that moment, you lose your sense of spatial time, and it feels like, I got to survive. I'm in danger. You may not be in danger, but you're going to behave like you're in danger.
I know somebody else had a question over here. Do you have a question right here? No? Right here? Right back there? Wait for the mic, please.
At the beginning of the session, it was stated that the things we tell people when they have trauma is you just need to pray more, and supposedly that's going to fix things. My question would be, have you observed that why we are inadequate in our capacity to help people is because this is more of an issue of the soul, the mind, the will, the emotions of what is actually happening to the person, and it then spills out into the body with your different various sundries of disease processes.
Yeah. So you've heard me say a couple times, nothing's broken. The way the brain is working is beyond my control, beyond your control. These are systems, this ANS, this autonomic nervous system, is programmed by our DNA. It gets further programming based on life experiences. We call it muscle memory. A more technical name is mirror neurons. We have billions and billions and billions of mirror neurons, okay? So when a baby is first born, what do all the people who hold the baby want to do? Coo. Adult language goes somewhere. All right? But what we're doing is extremely therapeutic because the child doesn't really have the capacity of language. It has the capacity of coo. And so when you coo back, you're helping that child understand its place in the world. You're helping the child develop its identity. So when the child makes a little face, you make the face back. You make a face, the child makes a face back at you. You do these gestures, and we mirror one another. We are mirroring one another right now. Why did you smile? Because I smiled. And you interpreted my smile as a friendly smile. In another context, someone would see me smile and feel threatened because the smile meant something else because of their programming. They didn't choose to think like that.
Wow.
They didn't choose to think like that. It's because of programming. And some of that programming, by the way, this programming as a result this ANS is coming from the brain stem. Where was it developed? In utero. In utero. 90% of our wiring of those mirror neurons and that reflection happened when we were in mama's womb.
Okay, I have to interrupt you.
Okay.
Because
Did I go too far?
No, I was trying to go there. So trauma then can literally begin in the womb.
Absolutely.
I think that's important for everybody to hear that and to know that. That is a huge, huge, huge thing. How many were kind of blown away by the whole smile thing? I mean, seriously, think about it. You're smiling at somebody, they smile back. It could be a threat to somebody in another setting, right? Who's been through a traumatic experience, and that's a huge thing.
I do this, and some of you feel one thing about seeing me do this, and some of you feel something else. What's right and what's wrong? Not. This is not a morality issue. This is a programming issue of which you don't have any control over, neither do I. Anybody had a bad sunburn before? And what do you do when someone comes to hug you and you've not informed them about your sunburn? And then you see their reaction. What are you compelled to do? I want to explain to you. I want to explain it. Now, that's a sunburn. See, I got this sunburn. That's observable. What happens when the burn is on the inside? How do you explain that? How do you explain that? And by the way, are you even aware of what the burn looks like or feels? Right? Because it's on the inside. Is it any less painful? And do we react any differently? Trust me, people, we've all had some levels of this. All of us. There are places you go and you instinctively do something without even thinking about it. There are places in the valley, if you drive into, you're making sure your doors are locked.
Amen.
There are places you may be walking, ladies, and you're going to make sure that that purse is tucked in a little tighter. No one told you to do that. Why are you doing that? Are you profiling? Please. This is your ANS. This is what God gave us as a means of surviving. Without it, we don't live. Okay? Let me introduce another idea. Do you know what a handrail is? I got a couple here this morning that has heard me talk about handrails before. Okay? Let's go back to the forest. Okay? And you've encountered the bear. And you know you're going to run away from the bear. And in your running away from the bear, yeah, exactly. That's what happens. My $10 paid off. That was really good. So you're running away from the bear, and in going through the forest, you realize, I'm running from the bear, and there is a fast-moving stream. It's got a lot of water in it. It's that time of the year, and it's kind of moving fast, and I got to get to the other side of the stream. But there's no bridge, and there's no handrails. But there seems to be this tree with some kind of an awkward limb over it. I'll hold on to the limb as I try to step on the rocks and get across the water. And after about your second step, and you're in the middle of the stream, you know what's going to happen. The limb snaps off. Now your handrail's gone. What are you feeling? Well, you were already feeling scared. Now you got a higher sense of fear because I'm not only running from a bear, I may fall in, not only get wet, because I'm not really maybe so concerned about getting wet, but this is not going to be helpful. That's exactly what a baby feels leaving mother's womb and stepping into the new world. Attachment is the handrail. And for 9 months, this child has only known one thing. In fact, the entirety 100% of its life at this point has only known one thing. The amniotic fluid swimming around its body, and then the sac and this umbilical cord that intimately connects the child with mother, all right? And at the moment that it's stepping into the new world, somebody cuts it. I'm no longer in the sac. I no longer am surrounded by this warm fluid, and my physical connection with mama is gone. Somebody moved the handrail, and in that moment, there is an attachment challenge. And what is essential to bridge this transition is skin-to-skin touch. That's why nurses and doctors want to see the mama and the baby skin to skin right here, eye to eye, okay? And there's a whole Torah principle in Leviticus that instructs women not to go to the temple and worship for 40 days so that this can happen. And that their worship in the temple is not a distraction to this bonding. But it doesn't get read that way in the English. It gets read as women are being punished because they gave birth to kids. By the way, that bonding time is required longer for girls. And Torah's instruction that is that if she gives birth to a female child, she is to stay away from the temple even longer because she needs more bonding time with the child. So attachment is the handrail. Attachment is about survival. It's about moving from one world to another world with a sense of security. Parents are the essential attachments for their children. But when parents have been harmful and they've not been trustworthy, then the child has what's called attachment trauma. And some adults still suffer from it because they never dealt with it.
Attachment trauma. Oh, you have a question back there? In the back.
In that attachment trauma, what's the difference from a single family home and a dual family home?
Well, there may be a difference, there may not be a difference. It really depends upon the one. When you say a one-family home, I should probably get you to clarify.
Like a single mother,
parent
a single
parents.
parent versus that, or maybe one of the parents has to work longer and the other one's at home, and so in that aspect.
Well, in the early developmental stages here, there's an essential connection between the child and mother. Why? Not dad. Well, dad didn't carry the child for 9 months. It's simple biology, people. This is not a gender issue here. This is simply biology, all right? But what often happens in a single-parent home, as opposed to a two-parent home, is that the mother is often the case, right? That's usually where it falls. Not always, but oftentimes. And so the mother is overtaxed in her responsibilities. She has a whole nother layer of distractions in order to keep the big picture and to keep the entire family afloat, which means I mean, we can start really appreciating this Torah instruction that women are not allowed at the temple because they need to spend all this concerted time with their child uninterrupted. Well, we don't have anything like that in our culture. I mean, FMLA is there, but how effective is that when you've already got 3 or 4 kids in the house, and this is the new kid, and you're a single parent? This becomes really, really challenging, okay? So not only is the child going to perhaps suffer from attachment trauma, but you've got a mom who's being triggered too, because she too is in survival mode. So now we have not only the child who's trying to survive, we have a mother who's trying to survive. We not only have a child who's being triggered, diaphragm up, incited, diaphragm down, suppressed, we have mama who's incited, suppressed, and who's the calm one in the family? And now we have other children in the house who are a little older, perhaps went through some similar circumstances when they were born, and so now we have a whole family unit that's experiencing trauma, and so you have individuals having their issues, but we also have the collective issue, and so trauma is essentially, again, not what happens to you, but how you react to what happens, and that reaction is based upon a stress response system, the ANS that's kicking in. And when that is unabated over a prolonged period of time, that will create what's called adverse childhood experiences. It's measurable now. There's a way of measuring this on a scale of 1 to 10. And 25% of children in Arizona in the general population under the age of 18, 25% of them have 3 or more ACEs. 4 or more is considered significant trauma. This becomes a behavioral thing, because how does the body act when it's in the survival mode? I got a sunburn. I got a sunburn. What do? We isolate, we pull back. There is a social and interpersonal impact that trauma has. This is another way of measuring if someone is experiencing trauma. I don't seem to be able to get or keep supportive, close friends. I tend to always be alone. Or it always feels like the world is on the dance floor and everybody is dancing to the same tune, but I got headphones on and I'm hearing something different. And my dance is not everybody else's. I'm weird. And they're looking at me like I'm weird. I want to fit in,